I know, I said I would switch to covering Rings of Power one episode at a time, but the finale is out, and having watched episodes 7 and 8, I think it makes a lot of sense to put them together. It's not that I'm ready to be done with this crap show and have no will to drag it out one moment longer than I absolutely have to. Nope, it's a practicality thing. Seriously. Let's start with episode 7, Doomed to Die. Jeez, writers, ever hear of a little thing called subtlety? We start with Celebrimbor, looking out over a quiet city, enjoying a cup of elven tea or something. The sun is shining, and the smith looks more at peace than we've seen him in a long time. Annatar Hellbrand Sauron comes in to check on Celebrimbor's progress. The smith tells him that the past few weeks have brought him a focus he didn't know he could have.
These past weeks, I have felt such clarity.
Wait a second. Did he just say weeks?
These past weeks.
Weeks. They want us to believe that Celebrimbor has been working on these 9 rings for weeks. Didn't Adar start laying siege to the city in the last episode? The answers are yes and yes. But hold on to that confusion. This is the first of a few setups for something that's going to be revealed later in the episode.
When the world is still,
then the ideas can flow.
For the moment, we see that Celebrimbor is still in Sauron's illusion that everything is right with the world. The bases of the 9 rings are finished, and the work will soon be completed. Annatar Hellbrand Sauron says that he'll be sad when their time together is over, but Celebrimbor says all things must end.
oh, all things must end.
Hope. Anyone else just get hit with a wave of nausea? The writers are using lines like this to wink at the audience. They want us to know that they know that we know that things are about to go bad, and it's what some of us like to call a death flag. Annatar Hellbrand Sauron goes back outside, where sure enough the city is under attack, but it doesn't look like weeks worth of damage. He talks to a guard in Merdania, where he assumes command of the city, lying that Celebrimbor has lost his mind and isn't able to do anything but work on the rings. Surprisingly, the guard guys accept this. Merdania, however, still has questions. Annatar Hellbrand Sauron charms her and asks her for her support, promising she will be duly rewarded for her loyalty. Oh jeez. Over in the orc camp, and no, I'm not calling them Uruks, they're orcs. Adar tells his orcs that it's time. They reposition the catapults and fire them at part of the mountain outside the city, triggering an avalanche which falls just in the right way to completely dam the river. In the forge, Celebrimbor is making progress on the rings, but he's starting to notice things are wonky. Theonor's hammer is missing a gem. A mouse passes by his workbench twice, so there's a glitch in the matrix.
Oh, deja vu.
Celebrimbor puts a black mark on a candle, presumably as a test because he's becoming more aware of the weirdness around him. Then, in Khazad-dûm, King Durin is told that an elf messenger has sent word that Eregion is under attack. The king takes a moment to wallow in self-satisfaction, certain that desperate elves will soon appear before his throne to beg for more mithril. King Durin wants the mines reopened, but his son and daughter-in-law are still camped out down there, blocking access. The king orders Narvi to open up the mines regardless of the cost, and we see Narvi and his workers heading into a confrontation. And just when it looks like they're about to throw down, the miners lay down their pickaxes and weapons. Apparently, hearing the king order them to fight his son and daughter-in-law was enough to convince Narvi that the old monarch had finally lost his mind. So instead of fighting, they side with the prince instead. Narvi tells Durin about the elf messenger, and Durin wants him brought into Khazad-dûm to meet with him. But he's told that will be hard, since the elf has been banished in all dwarven lands. Meaning, yes, the elf messenger is Elrond. And that is interesting for a couple of reasons. For one, it means he is not hastening to Eregion with the elf army, as Galadriel told Adar. He's pacing around outside Khazad-dûm. But also, given what happened last time Elrond was there, he's not going to be welcome. Based on what we've been told, the very sight of him could set off a riot. They're going to have to come up with a carefully planned, elaborate way to sneak him in, or they could just jump straight to having him inside.
That was easy.
Well, you can probably guess how this goes. After some playful banter, Elrond asks Durin to send his army to back up the elves at Eregion, and we cut away before Durin has a chance to answer. Meanwhile, the orcs begin their charge across the now dry riverbed and start the attack on the city walls. Merdania is walking along the battlements and spots something she calls a ravager, some kind of siege weapon the orcs are pushing towards the wall. Laying aside for a moment that they don't explain what a ravager is, I am more baffled that Merdania is on the wall. Why is she there? She's not a soldier, she's not a guard, she's not going to fight orcs. Why would they let her wander around the most dangerous place in the city? Well, there's no in-universe reason, but we all know what it is. Inside the forge, Annatar Hellbrand Sauron returns to check on Celebrimbor's progress again. He's getting antsy about time. But Celebrimbor tells him that they apparently have all the time in the world. You see, he's been watching things in the workshop, and noticed the same mouse making the same movements on the loop. And as for the candle he marked, the mark is still there, which means the candle hasn't burnt down an inch all day. So you see, not only did Sauron trap Celebrimbor in an illusion, but he's also placed the forge in some kind of time anomaly. Time inside the forge has been looping, so that weeks have passed for Celebrimbor, while only a few hours have passed in the outside world. Yes, they actually want us to believe that Sauron is capable of doing this, and no, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But this revelation has convinced the Smith that Annatar is not one of the Valar, because they wouldn't screw around with time like this. Annatar Halbrand Sauron tries to talk his way out of this, but Celebrimbor loses his temper again, and throws Feanor's hammer at him, but then the hammer smashes a window, and just like that, Sauron's powerful spell is broken. Outside, the Smith can hear the sounds of the attack. Screams of frightened people. Racing to the window only confirms this, and Celebrimbor finally sees the truth of what is happening. The full revelation is too much, and he starts to break down and cry. And I really can't stand this character. He's been a mindless, gutless fool this entire series, and now he's a whining wretch too. Anyway, as Celebrimbor demands to know who Annatar really is, he knocks over the container of mithril, and discovers that it isn't really mithril at all. With the illusion broken, he sees that the container actually holds black goo, like Sauron's black goo blood. Wait a minute. Show, are you actually trying to tell me that Sauron didn't smuggle mithril powder out of Khazad-dûm? That instead he cast an illusion to make his black goo look like mithril? That Celebrimbor mixed Sauron's black goo with metal to forge the 9 rings for men? That's what you want me to believe? That black goo can be used in place of mithril to forge metal rings?
Is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
Okay, you know what? Screw it. We're so close to the end. Let's just keep going and get through this. Celebrimbor figures out that his partner isn't Annatar of the Valar, and he isn't Halbrand of the Southlands. He is in fact Sauron the Deceiver. The Smith flees from the forge and races to the battlements, where he tries to tell Mordania and the guards the truth, but they all think he's crazy, so they don't believe him. Mordania still has some pity for her old boss, so she tries to take him by the arm to lead him back to the forge. Celebrimbor yanks his hand away, and Sauron uses some kind of Jedi force push to knock Mordania off the wall, where she's killed by an orc. I guess that was her just reward for flirting with the devil. Sauron saddles up next to Celebrimbor and tells him to get back to work, or he'll lose everyone he cares about.
Finish the 9, and I will spare your city.
Below, the siege weapon has reached the wall. Orcs hammer anchor bits in place, so the Ravager can tear chunks out of the wall. Next, Elrond has arrived with what looks like the whole elf army. So in the past few hours, Elrond has convinced Gil-galad to send the army to Eregion instead of Mordor, rode to Khazad-dûm to talk with Durin, then rode back to join the army and made it all the way to Eregion. Yeah, sure, why not? Next to full sensory illusions and localized time paradoxes, characters teleporting around the map is just about the easiest thing to accept in this episode so far. Anyway, the elf army and even Gil-galad are there, but for some reason Elrond is the one commanding the army. How did that happen? We've been told more than once he's just a politician.
As you are so fond of reminding me, Galadriel, I am but a politician.
Since when is he a commander that leads an army? Since right now, I guess. So the orcs have lined up and the elves have lined up, and we get that epic scene from the trailer. The cavalry charges forward, and the scene might have worked to pull some emotion from me if it weren't for two things. One is the laughably bad post-coloring work, showing the elf side in bright sunlight, and the orc side in impossibly unnatural darkness, because the orcs can't stand the sun. But we don't see anything that could cast this dark of a shadow, so it just looks wrong. This show picks the strangest times to stick to the lore. The other problem is how this scene ends. We were baited at the beginning of the season with promises of a vast battle sequence that stretched over 2 episodes. They played up all the amazing action in store for us, and this epic charge should be the start of that. Only it's not. As the elves charge forward, the orcs wheel a covered cage into view and dramatically pull the cover off. Galadriel is all chained up with a sword at her throat, and Elrond stops the charge short. So instead of a battle, we get a parley between Elrond and Adar. Not sure why again it's Elrond negotiating with Adar and not Gil-galad or one of his top lieutenants, but whatever. Adar offers to free Galadriel in exchange for her magic ring. Elrond claims that he didn't bring it and wouldn't give it up even if he did. Adar threatens that if Elrond chooses to fight, they will meet him on the field of battle carrying Galadriel's head on a pike. Elrond says that's basically okay with him, but before he leaves he wants to say goodbye. Adar lets him. And whoa, that's some goodbye. This show has been ripping off a lot of things, but I didn't expect to see MILF Manor in Rings of Power. If you guys didn't know, in the lore, Galadriel has a very alive husband, Celeborn, and they have a daughter named Celebrian, who Elrond eventually marries, making Galadriel Elrond's mother-in-law. So yeah, this isn't creepy at all. As they are leaving, Elrond is told that the orcs outnumber the elves 10-1, but Elrond isn't bothered by this, because he says that Durin is coming with the dwarves. All they need to do is hold out until daybreak. Of course, they say this as they're leaving the enemy camp, and any orc could have heard them. Doesn't seem very bright. In Khazad-dûm, Durin is giving a speech to a whole bunch of dwarves. It's very inspirational and rallies everyone to join the fight. Cut with the speech, we see that Elrond slipped Galadriel more than a little tongue. He also gave her a lockpick. And Celebrimbor has gone back to the forge to work on the rings, because the script said so, I guess. But now the battle really begins. There's fighting, orcs are climbing ladders and getting into the city, while the Ravager thing continues to take chunks out of the wall. Adar returns to his tent to find Galadriel gone. She's covered herself in a tunic and is trying to sneak out of the camp.
What's with the...
It's my disguise.
I can see your face.
Not when I do this, you can't.
But she gets found out and is in trouble when Arondir shows up at just the right moment to save her, because they had to give him a win somewhere. Back in Khazad-dûm, Prince Dern has already assembled the entire army and is ready to set out for Eregion. But before he can leave, Narvi runs up and says the king has gone full Jack Torrance and attacks some of the miners with an axe.
Here's Johnny!
Narvi says he's going to unleash the evil beast. Okay, so here's the thing. The ancient evil monster was a theory that Disa had after she heard something in that hidden cavern. Last we knew, Prince Dern was the only one who believed her. When did that change? I don't know, but Dern is told he has to call the army back. He has to stop his father, or he won't have a home to return to. But Dern doesn't need a whole army to stop one dwarf, even if it is the king. He could send the army ahead, but no, if Dern doesn't go, nobody does, apparently. Speaking of Eregion, Sauron is prodding Celebrimbor while he works, and we get the scene the writers have been hinting at. We finally get some insight into Sauron's perspective, but all it amounts to is a single conversation. Sauron says that he was tortured by Morgoth, which left him with some deep emotional scars. Sauron says Morgoth wanted to destroy everything, while he wants to heal it by using rings to manipulate and control all life on Earth. Yep, writers want you to believe that Sauron is really driven by a misguided sense of altruism, broken by emotional baggage, because he is, after all, just another victim. But Sauron is also a liar and a deceiver, and I don't know why we should believe a single thing he says. Anyway, Sauron leaves and Celebrimbor immediately throws the 9 rings into the fire in an attempt to destroy them. But of course that doesn't work. So the smith decides to make a run with the rings to get them away from Sauron. Unfortunately, he's been chained to his workbench and can't break the manacle, so in an act of ultimate desperation, Celebrimbor sacrifices his thumb. Ouch. Outside, he doesn't make it very far before he's knocked down by an explosion. But then Galadriel's there. Somehow she and Arondir found a secret way into the city that we've never heard of before, which is really convenient for them. I just hope the orcs don't find it. Galadriel intends to send Celebrimbor out the way she came in so that she can face Sauron. But the smith insists that she escape with the rings. He has to stay, because Eregion is his home. Celebrimbor says that part of him knew all along he had been working with Sauron, and he let himself be deceived, because he wanted what Sauron had promised. Galadriel agrees and admits she fell for the same deception. Now while it's nice that Galadriel finally admits this, it's also too little too late. And because this is Rings of Power, the revelation is delivered in the most annoying way possible, stating again more explicitly that our heroes are weak-willed idiots who are complicit in Sauron's rise to power. Celebrimbor then goes on a soliloquy about how strength doesn't overcome darkness. Light does. That doesn't sound nearly as inspirational as the writers think, and I have no idea what it means in this context. The orcs are about to breach the city. People are dying. Sauron is an arm's length from getting what he wants. How is light supposed to help here? Never mind. My bad for trying to make sense of this again. Outside the city, the battle is still going. They see the Ravager machine and move in to destroy it before it can tear down the wall. Jump to Sauron tearing the forge apart looking for the 9 rings, when Celebrimbor and a few guards return. Sauron kills the guards without trying and seizes Celebrimbor, promising to make him give up the rings. But back to the battle where Adar has finally unleashed the big guy. He picks his way through the battlefield, killing elves and orcs alike. He knocks Elrond several feet away, but doesn't kill him, because of all the characters here, Elrond is the one with plot armor. Arondir and Gil-galad show up in just the nick of time to take the big guy down. Wow, all that build-up and anticipation, and he lasted less than 5 minutes. But there are more orcs who have regrouped and formed another charge. Our heroes are outnumbered. It looks like the end. Only the sun is rising. That means Durin should be arriving with the dwarf army. Just like the Rohirrim in the Battle of Helm's Deep, right? Actually, no, they don't. The dwarves aren't coming. Elrond can't accept that his friend is a no-show, and has a bit of an emo breakdown. He just kind of sits there while a bunch of his people are killed. But Adar does show up. Arondir tries to take him on and immediately loses. Did they just give my favorite pointless character a pointless death? I kinda doubt it, but we'll have to wait to find out, because this episode ends as the orcs break into the city, and we see Adar take Galadriel's ring from a defeated Elrond. So that's the penultimate episode. There's a lot going on here as it tries to wrap up all the disparate plot points. But the most impressive thing is how they baited us with the promotional material, promising a big 2-episode battle scene with an epic charge by the elves, when in reality, the charge ended not in battle but a conversation. The battle itself takes up about 17 minutes of this episode. That is how long the scenes showing the battle add up to if you put them all together. This action is disjointed and confused with no real idea of how the battlefield is laid out. That means characters jump from one area to the next, or conveniently pop up out of nowhere. There's no sense of where anyone is in relation to anything else. And it is basically over at this point. I'm not sure what they were counting as 2 episodes, except for maybe the start of the siege right at the end of episode 6. But believe it or not, this isn't the only thing they gaslit us about. Let's get into the finale and I'll show you. Episode 8 opens in Khazad-dûm. Durin finds Disa looking after the men the king attacked. She says the ring has taken the king body and soul, because they have to remind us over and over why this is happening. They exchange a heartfelt moment, and Durin heads out after his father. And I have to point out that Durin is alone. Why did he recall the whole army if he was going to confront the king by himself? There is no reason, just more forced contrivance. The king is down in a mine shaft, using a battering ram to break rocks. We see the impacts from the battering ram are sending thunderous shockwaves through the rock, and something is waking up. The prince yells out to his father to stop, and pleads with him to take off his ring again. This time the prince threatens his father that he'll take off his whole hand if he doesn't, but it's an empty threat. Instead, he has an emotional breakdown, and it turns out the prince is mostly talk with virtually no action. In his father's presence, Durin is little more than a boy in an adult's body. Of course, the king doesn't listen to his son's pleas, and with one final crack, he breaks through the wall. In the chamber beyond, the king proudly shows his son what he calls the dynasty of Durin, a massive deposit of mithril. But this is another wink and nod at the audience, because we know what's about to happen. The real legacy of Durin is unleashing the Balrog, which becomes known as Durin's Bane, since it brings his dynasty to an end. Sure enough, a fiery orange light rises up. Prince Durin cries out to run, just as the Balrog emerges. And in this moment, the king comes back to his senses. In an instant, he seems to understand and removes his ring of power. He tells his son that he's stronger than he thinks. And with that, the king lifts his axe and attacks the Balrog. The clash of the weapons sets off a shockwave that collapses the entrance to the tunnel. The king is dead. Long live the king. But he sacrificed himself to save Khazad-dûm. No, really. That's it from the Balrog. That's the last we see of him this season. Even though we just saw the thing demolishing rock and stone like it was crepe paper, the tunnel caving in was enough to seal him away safely, at least for now. It's not a threat anymore. Yes, really. They've been teasing this bastard out for 2 seasons, and this is all we get. A fan service cameo.
What's all the racket?
What are you doing here?
A very brief cameo.
Me too.
Anyway, we're back with Pseudo Gandalf. It seems that he chose to save his friends over sitting around by himself to wait for Godot. And if you got that joke, we can be friends. Somehow, Pseudo Gandalf managed to find and wander right into the Stoor's village. I don't know how he did that, but the village seems to be deserted. Then the Dark Wizard appears. Dark Wiz expresses admiration at meeting Pseudo Gandalf and offers him everything that he's been searching for.
Your past, your name, even your staff.
Of course we know he's lying, because Not Tom told us that all those things cannot be given. Needless to say, Pseudo Gandalf isn't interested, but Dark Wiz doesn't want to take no for an answer. With a wave of his hand, the masked hunters appear with Nori and Poppy. So they did come back and capture the whole village. Guess their plan to put up some kind of fight worked about as well as we expected. The masked hunters threaten the Harfoots just like in Pseudo Gandalf's vision, and here the writers go off the map. The Dark Wiz is actually upset that the hunters are threatening the Harfoots. He says he doesn't want them harmed, but the masked guys say they want what Dark Wiz promised them. So the Harfoots are not being held hostage to coerce Pseudo Gandalf, but to threaten the Dark Wiz. This twist comes out of nowhere. We don't know enough about these groups to know what they want, what their motivations are, so there isn't enough context for any of this to make sense. Anyway, Dark Wiz sends the masked leader flying. He's impaled and killed on a piece of wood. The other masked dudes run away at this point, and that's it for them. Another antagonist that they've built up over the course of the season is just disposed of. But through some heavy-handed exposition, we find out that Dark Wiz wants Pseudo Gandalf to join with him, so they can kill Sauron and take over as the Dark Lord. When Pseudo Gandalf says no again, Dark Wiz destroys part of the village, and sends rocks raining down on everyone. But Pseudo Gandalf's magic awakens, and he's able to hold off the rocks while everyone runs. In Numenor, Elendil's daughter has summoned the leaders of the faithful to a meeting with Pharazôn, where the new king claims that Miriel survived her trial not because of the Valar, but because of Sauron, which he says means all of the faithful are now aligned with Sauron. Cue the montage of people being rounded up and arrested. Daughter goes to warn her dad that the guards are coming for him. Though shouldn't they have gone after Elendil first, locking up the leaders of the movement before rounding up random people on the street? Doesn't that make more sense? And never mind, I just answered my own question. Apparently, in a moment of conscience, the daughter distracts the guards so her father can get away. Elendil goes to see Miriel to tell her they have to leave Numenor, but Miriel is determined to stay. She says her place is on the island. And then she gives him a sword. Sorry, not a sword. The sword. Miriel gives him Narsil and tells him to go reclaim his destiny.
Reclaim your lordship, and with this sword, your destiny.
There is so much I could say about this and how little it works, but no. Moving on. The orcs are in Eregion, yelling and killing, everyone's dying, and no, I don't count this as part of the battle scene. The battle is over. This is just slaughter. Elsewhere, Galadriel pops out of the secret passage with a few elves, and surprise, the orcs have found it. But they didn't use it to enter the city, they just kind of camped out by it, waiting for someone to sneak out. And just like that, Galadriel is captured. Again. In the forge, Sauron shoots Celebrimbor full of arrows. But Celebrimbor won't give up the rings. He says the rings of power will be his downfall.
The rings of power shall destroy you.
Sauron loses his temper and kills the Smith. Bye, Celebrimbor. You were a shadow of a better character, and after the utter fool you've been, I can't say I'm that sorry to see you go. For some reason, Sauron starts to cry about this. Do they really want us to believe that he's conflicted? Regretful? I don't know, but for all their attempts to make Sauron a complex and sympathetic character, all they've really done is make him a weak, pathetic, emotionally fragile beta male with schizoaffective disorder. This is not Sauron. A group of orcs breaks into the forge while Sauron's having his moment. Glug is leading the group, which is a bit of surprise. See, in the last episode, Glug wasn't happy about how things were going. He wanted Adar to withdraw and lead the orcs home. As the rest of the orcs charged into battle, he hung back, refusing to fight. Yet now he's leading one of the first waves of orcs to enter the city, but they're setting something up here, because Glug is looking for Sauron, and you can probably guess why. We cut to Isildur and Theo. Apparently they're back home in the Númenórean settlement. They have a heart-to-heart bonding over their dead moms. Then Estrid comes in, and it's awkward. Outside, the dork kid Kinman arrives at the settlement with a bunch of guards. He declares the settlement is now a Númenórean fortress under his command. And then Isildur walks up, and we get another awkward scene, where Kinman pretends to be friendly at first, before pulling Isildur aside and telling him his dad is now wanted for treason. At Eregion, we see that Gil-galad and Elrond have been captured. And so is Arondir, who's still alive, somehow. In a forest outside of Eregion, the orcs bring Galadriel to Adar. Why is he off in the woods alone? Well, Adar is wearing Galadriel's ring, and it's healing him. He is regaining some of his elfiness. Adar gives Galadriel her ring back. He wants to kill Sauron and afterward promises to take the orcs back to Mordor. He hopes the rings will heal the rift between them, or something like that. They are interrupted by orcs carrying Glug on a mat. They tell Adar that he was wounded by Sauron. When Adar goes to check on Glug, the orc stabs Adar, and the rest join in, taking turns stabbing their father to death, in a way that is meant to parallel the betrayal of Sauron in the first episode. So yeah, Adar's dead, possibly the most interesting antagonist in the show, and they just threw him away for a pointless plot twist they didn't earn. Sauron emerges from behind a tree before telling the rest of the orcs to destroy Eregion, and they obey him because now they're under his control for some reason. Galadriel attacks Sauron, and it's painfully obvious that she's no match for him. She's been waiting thousands of years for this moment, to take on Sauron, to destroy him, and she doesn't stand a chance. Sauron makes himself look like Halbrand again, then he looks like Galadriel, so she's basically fighting herself. Then he looks like Celebrimbor. Sauron is trying to throw her off, and it works because she's an idiot. Galadriel loses control of her anger, and though she manages to get a couple hits in, Sauron stabs her with a crown. She falls, and Sauron takes the 9 rings. Things are looking pretty bad, except that we know Galadriel can't die, just like we knew Sauron would get the 9 rings, so there's no drama in this at all. This is just going through the motions with extra steps. Anyway, the dwarves finally show up. Better late than never, I guess. They fight off the remaining orcs and save our core cast. They find Galadriel near death. Gil-galad tries to heal her using his ring, but it's not enough. Elrond finds Galadriel's ring and puts it on so they can heal her together. But we don't see that. Instead, we cut to the Harfoots and the Stoors. The Stoors aren't going to rebuild their village. They are packing up to leave it instead, and Nori and Poppy have decided to go with them. Pseudo-Gandalf comes back, and the Stoors start calling him Grand Elf.
Thank you kindly, Grand Elf. Goodbye, Grand Elf.
It gets repeated several times, leading to the second worst reveal in the series so far. The first was when it turned out that Halbrand was Sauron, but this is right up there with it, because the stranger, the Grand Elf, is indeed Gandalf.
Gandalf. That's what they're going to call me, isn't it?
Yeah, this is not a surprise, but I'm going to stick with my nickname anyway. Pseudo-Gandalf finds a random piece of wood in the rubble. It's his staff, and then he goes back to see Tom Bombadil. The dwarves are back in Khazad-dûm to have a funeral for the king. Isildur is getting ready to sail back to Númenor. Miriel is in chains. And Elendil is running away, just like in his vision. Galadriel awakens all healed up in a scene that's clearly meant to emulate when Frodo awakened in Rivendell. And sure enough, the place where the survivors of the battle have gathered is meant to serve as the founding of Rivendell. The elves have to decide whether they will attack Sauron again right away, or bide their time, to heal and regroup. Galadriel quotes Celebrimbor, that light, not strength, overcomes darkness, which doesn't answer the dilemma, but the show acts like it does, and on that note, the second season of Rings of Power ends. It's been an impressive cavalcade of garbage. The writers disrespected the source material, reducing it to Easter eggs and callbacks. They wasted our time with boring, meandering plot filler. They assassinated several characters, especially the men, by turning them into emotionally fragile wimps. Sauron is supposed to be a master deceiver, but in Rings of Power, our characters admit that they allowed themselves to be fooled. They wanted to believe Sauron's lies. So it's not that Sauron was strong so much as that our good guys are weak. And that is because the writers are weak, and they can't think of another way to depict the rise of the Dark Lord. This messy application of the plot screws up the characters and results in a lack of investment, which makes most of the dramatic moments land with the impact of a wet diaper. Once again, Rings of Power is not Lord of the Rings. It is a vanity project made by media illiterate activists. It is a bad fan fiction, And unlike Tolkien's work that has lasted over 7 decades, Rings of Power will not be remembered a few years from now. It is a legacy written in the sand. But that's just one Rebel's opinion. What are your thoughts on Rings of Power Season 2? Let me know in the comments. Like the video and subscribe to the channel so you'll get all the latest updates from Rebel Normal.